A very warm welcome. You're watching CNN News 18's Global with me, Akanksha Swaroop. I dive into this segment with my top focus on Russia. Traditionally, it's meant to be an exhibition of patriotism. And yes, I'm talking about the Victory Day Parade, one that marks the Soviet Union's role in defeating Nazi Germany in World War II. But this year's Victory Day Parade in Moscow has been overshadowed by the war in Ukraine. The biggest reason why the Russian President Vladimir Putin led a scaled-down parade in Moscow on Tuesday. This is he repeated his assertions that the West had launched a true war against Russia despite the Kremlin's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. Meanwhile, thousands of people lined the streets of Moscow's Red Square as part of Russia's annual parade, an exhibition of patriotism marking the Soviet Union's role in defeating Nazi Germany. Previous Russian Victory Day military parades have seen fleets of tanks processing through Moscow's Red Square in a show of military might. In contrast, on Tuesday, only one was on show, a T-34 Soviet-era tank, but the occasion was also used as an opportunity to display the unity of Russia-led Commonwealth states. On the other hand, Ukraine's President Zelensky has declared May 9 as Europe Day. And in a meeting with the EU President Ursula von der Leyen in Kiev, Zelensky has said that he discussed European integration, defense matters and even sanctions against Russia. Zelensky also expected the EU to remove trade restrictions on grain imports from Ukraine. This after the trading bloc put measures in place after complaints from Poland, Hungary, Romania, Slovakia and even Bulgaria. Now, Zelensky told reporters the moves were harsh and protectionist. Now, the Ukrainian president has also added that he expected a positive quote-unquote appraisal of Ukraine joining the EU at its summit in June this year. This as he's already thanked European countries for the promise of 1 million artillery shells. Now, in more concern for the Kremlin, the head of Russia's Wagner mercenary group has accused the Russian army of fleeing its positions around the city of Bakhmut. It should be noted that the Wagner group is leading the assault on Bakhmut. Let's try and get in a sense of perspective on all these developments that have been taking place, not just in Russia, but also in Ukraine. And for that, I'm joined in by my guest today, senior and renowned journalist Fred Ware, who's joining me live from Moscow. Many thanks to you, Fred, for joining in. Let's talk about Putin's message at the Victory Day Parade first. Putin has had to defend his invasion during his speech. What does it speak of the Russian president's position in his own country?
Well, he didn't say anything new. He reiterated the themes that he has been for quite a while now. Basically, that this war is existential for Russia. The United West is against Russia. And he called for patriotism and unity. It was, as you said, a scaled back event, not quite the pageant that it usually is. And I think that may be partly due to security concerns, because you remember there was that probably Ukrainian drone attack on the Kremlin, that exact venue, barely a week ago. So I think that it was a perfunctory speech. It was only 10 minutes, and a perfunctory parade. It got done. And that was, I think, the best that could be hoped for.
Right.
Yeah.
Fred, since you mentioned the Kremlin attack, ever since that happened, and we all know that happened just days before the Victory Day Parade, we've been reading reports of how there were possibilities being speculated of a body double being present at the Victory Day Parade. How do you weigh in on that theory? In fact, that was not just a theory, it was also a view that had been endorsed by one of the senior politicians in Ukraine.
You know, I tend to discount almost everything that comes out of Ukraine about Russia. I mean, there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation out there, but you can practically guess if the Ukrainian defense minister is saying it about Russia or about Putin, that it's probably something mischievous. Anyway, I don't know about Putin's body doubles, but there were several close-ups of him as he was giving his speech, so it looked like him.
All
But
right.
I'm not on intimate terms with him, so I can't.
Right. I know. But Fred, as someone who's been, been viewing this parade for decades, I'm sure, how different was this year's Victory Day parade compared to past years, especially the one in 2021? Was the scaling back a reflection of Russia's own battleground losses in the war? And not to forget the strained relationships now that Russia has, because remember, this parade has also hosted the likes of German Chancellor Angela Merkel and even former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan.
Yes, well, those are bygone days. It was a much bigger event in the past, but after 2014, when the crisis between Russia and the West began, foreign leaders, at least Western leaders, stopped coming. And today there were 7 heads of state or leaders, foreign leaders, all of them from the post-Soviet region. And that's probably the smallest contingent of foreigners to be there on the reviewing stand with Putin. The parade itself was a pale shadow of what it has been in the past. A few thousand troops, some veterans. There aren't very many actual veterans of that war around anymore. Some ICBMs, S-400s, as you said, only one World War II era tank, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have any tanks left. It just means they decided to produce a very smaller version of the parade and do it faster. And tanks are a real big deal to get across Red Square, So maybe they just left the tanks out.
Right. Fred, Putin was surrounded by a number of post-Soviet leaders at the parade, namely Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia, Uzbekistan, and several others. Was this not a first in several years, and what was the political messaging behind their presence?
It's very hard to say what is happening in the post-Soviet region. And intuition would suggest that a lot of countries are leery of Russia, but at the same time, many of them are growing closer economically in this sanctions regime to Russia, as, say, India is, not out of love, but out of changed circumstances and economic opportunities. So I think that, it's not terribly controversial for, say, the Prime Minister of Armenia to come to Moscow for the Victory Day parade, because the Victory Day over Nazi Germany is something that everybody agrees with. It is so. I think in all their cases, it's hedging their bets, keep playing nice with Russia, and possibly while they're here, they'll engage in some substantive, conversations.
Right. And before I let you go, Fred, it's certainly a do or die for the Wagner Group. But what could be the potential ramifications if the Wagner Group does decide to leave the battlefield in Bakhmut?
Well, they say they're not going to. They say they've got their ammunition, but at the same time,
right. But there's been a lot of back and forth. So Prigozhin does seem like a very unpredictable personality.
He's a bombastic guy, and as it has to be pointed out, he's a private actor. He runs a company, a military company, which happens to field a rather powerful strike force down there in Bakhmut. But he's clearly a very ambitious guy. I think that you can't separate what he's doing right now from some kind of political ambitions that he has. And he is engaged in a very public power struggle with the Ministry of Defense. I don't see how that can turn out well for him. But
turn out for the battlefield if he does choose to leave. Because I know that, that's a concern which the Kremlin has already addressed. They said that he'll be branded as a traitor if he does choose to leave. Will that threat, in fact, stop him is yet to be seen. But what happens to the battleground?
Well, what he said when he threatened to leave was that he would turn over his positions to the Russian military. And then the leader of Chechnya, who I think is working sort of hand in glove with Prigozhin, they're pursuing some joint ambitions, I suspect. But he said the Chechen Akhmat forces will take the Wagner places in Bakhmut. So I don't know what can happen. I think the Battle of Bakhmut is practically over. It's really on its last legs. The city is almost like 95% taken
Right.
by the Russians already. So I don't really know what this squabbling is about. It may become clearer in some time.
Absolutely. I think we'll have to leave it at that as of now. Many thanks to you, Fred, for bringing in your precious inputs to this show.